I'm Sarah, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, I believed my parents loved me and my brother equally. I thought the small differences in how they treated us were just normal family dynamics. But on what should have been the happiest day of my life, my wedding day, I discovered a truth so devastating that it changed everything I thought I knew about my family. What my parents were hiding wasn't just favoritism. It was a systematic pattern of manipulation that had been going on for years, and it involved money, lies, and a level of betrayal I never could have imagined. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, or if you've questioned whether you're imagining the differential treatment, this story is for you. Because sometimes the truth is even worse than what we suspect, but discovering it can also set us free. Let me take you back to where this all began, because understanding the full scope of what happened requires knowing the foundation that was built years before my wedding day. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. While my brother Jake was 3 years younger and seemed to coast through life, I was the one getting good grades, working part-time jobs in high school, and planning for college. My parents would often tell people how proud they were of their hardworking daughter, but I started noticing early on that their actions didn't always match their words. When I was 17 and Jake was 14, I needed $500 for a college application fee and SAT prep materials. I had saved $300 from my part-time job at the local bookstore, but I needed help with the rest. My parents told me they were tight on money and suggested I take on more hours at work. I did exactly that, working evenings and weekends to make up the difference, which meant my grades suffered slightly that semester. 2 months later, Jake casually mentioned that our parents had bought him a $700 guitar because he expressed interest in learning to play. When I brought this up to my mother, she explained that Jake was going through a difficult phase and needed something to keep him motivated. She said my situation was different because I was already motivated and capable of handling things on my own. At the time, I actually felt proud that they saw me as capable and independent. I didn't realize that this was the beginning of a pattern where my needs would consistently be minimized while Jake's wants were treated as priorities. Throughout college, I worked multiple jobs to pay for expenses my partial scholarship didn't cover. I would call home exhausted from juggling classes, work, and studying, and my parents would listen politely before shifting the conversation to Jake's latest interests or achievements. He was still in high school, playing varsity soccer, and they attended every single one of his games. I can count on one hand the number of times they visited me at college, which was only 2 hours away. When I graduated summa cum laude with my degree in education, my parents attended the ceremony but left immediately afterward for Jake's championship soccer game. I had hoped we could celebrate together, maybe go to dinner, but they explained that Jake's game was more important because it was happening in real time, and my graduation was already over. After college, I moved back home temporarily while I job hunted and saved money for my own apartment. This was when I really started to notice the financial disparities. Jake had a car that our parents had bought him for his 16th birthday. I was still driving the same used Honda I had purchased myself at 17 with money from my summer job. When Jake graduated high school, our parents threw him a party that cost over $2,000. When I graduated college, they took me to dinner at Applebee's. But I rationalized all of this. I told myself that Jake was the baby, that parents naturally coddled younger children more, and that I should be grateful for how my independence had shaped me into a strong person. The real wake-up call should have come when I got engaged to my now husband, David. We had been together for 3 years, and he had been patient and supportive through all of my family dynamics. When we announced our engagement, my parents seemed happy but not excited. They asked basic questions about our timeline and budget, but they didn't offer to help or even ask if we needed anything. Meanwhile, Jake had started dating Emma, a girl from his college, and my parents were completely smitten with her. Emma was from a wealthy family, and my parents would constantly talk about her father's successful business and her mother's involvement in charity work. They would invite Jake and Emma over for dinner multiple times a week, and my mother would spend hours preparing elaborate meals for these occasions. When David and I would visit, which was less frequent since we were both working and planning our wedding, my mother would order pizza or make simple sandwiches. I started to feel like an afterthought in my own family, but I convinced myself that it was because Jake and Emma were still in college and had more free time. The wedding planning process was when things really started to unravel. David and I had been saving for 2 years and had managed to put together a budget of $15,000 for our wedding. It wasn't extravagant, but it was meaningful to us. We were planning to have the ceremony at a beautiful local park with a reception at a nearby community center. I had hoped that my parents might offer to contribute something, especially since they had always talked about wanting to be part of their children's weddings. But when I mentioned our plans, they simply said they were excited to attend and asked what they could do to help that didn't involve money. I accepted this, assuming they were still tight on finances like they had been throughout my college years. I threw myself into planning every detail, from making my own centerpieces to finding a budget-friendly caterer. David and I spent weekends visiting venues, tasting cakes, and addressing invitations by hand to save money. About 3 months before the wedding, I overheard a phone conversation between my parents that changed everything. They were talking about Jake and Emma, and my mother was saying something about how they needed to make sure they had enough saved for when Jake and Emma got married because they wanted to give them a proper wedding. My father responded that they had been setting aside money for Jake's future wedding for the past year and were up to about $20,000. They were planning to give him $30,000 total when the time came. I stood frozen in the hallway, processing what I had just heard. My parents had been saving money for Jake's hypothetical future wedding, while I was stressed about paying for flowers and trying to cut corners on everything for my actual current wedding. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times they had told me money was tight, all the times I had worked extra hours to pay for things myself, all the times I had felt guilty for even asking for help. Meanwhile, they had been secretly saving thousands of dollars for my brother's wedding to a girl he had been dating for less than a year. I decided to address this directly with my mother the next day. I told her I had overheard their conversation and asked if they were planning to contribute anything to my wedding. She became immediately defensive and said that they had never committed to paying for my wedding, that I had never asked them directly, and that I seemed to have everything under control. When I pointed out that they were saving for Jake's wedding, she said that was different because Jake would need more help and that Emma's family would expect a certain level of wedding. She actually said that David's family and I were more practical and wouldn't need as much support. This conversation left me feeling completely deflated. I realized that my parents had created a narrative where my competence and independence were actually being used against me. Because I had always managed to handle things on my own, they felt justified in not helping me, while simultaneously preparing to give Jake everything he might need. But the real devastation was still to come. 2 weeks before my wedding, my parents told me they needed to talk to me about something important. They sat me down in the living room where I had announced my engagement, where I had shown them my dress, where I had gone over all the wedding details with them multiple times. My mother started by saying how proud they were of me and how beautiful the wedding was going to be. Then she paused and said that they had run into a scheduling conflict. Jake's girlfriend Emma was having her birthday party the same day as my wedding. Not just any birthday party, but her 21st birthday party, which her parents were throwing at an expensive country club about 4 hours away from where my wedding was taking place. My parents explained that Emma's parents had specifically invited them to this party and that it was very important to Emma that they attend. They said that Emma had been crying about how much it would mean to her to have Jake's family there and that they felt obligated to support her because she was going to be family too. I sat there in complete shock as my parents told me that they would not be attending my wedding because they had committed to going to my brother's girlfriend's birthday party instead. I asked them if they were serious, if they really planned to miss their own daughter's wedding for a birthday party. My mother said that they had thought about it very carefully, and that Emma's party was a once-in-a-lifetime event since it was her 21st birthday, while weddings were more common. She actually said that weddings were more common than 21st birthdays. I asked them to explain how they could prioritize Emma's birthday over their own daughter's wedding. My father said that Emma's family was very important to them and that they couldn't risk damaging their relationship with them by missing such a significant event. I pointed out that they were damaging their relationship with me by missing my wedding, and my mother said that was different because I would understand and forgive them, while Emma's family might not be so understanding. They were counting on my forgiveness while prioritizing someone else's potential disappointment. I left their house that day knowing that something fundamental had broken between us, but I still didn't understand the full scope of what was happening. The week before my wedding, I was talking to my future mother-in-law about how hurt I was that my parents wouldn't be there. She listened patiently and then asked me something that had never occurred to me. She asked if I was sure that this birthday party was real or if there might be something else going on. I told her that of course it was real. Why would my parents lie about something like that? But her question planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't shake. That night, I decided to do something I had never done before. I looked up Emma's social media accounts to see if she had posted anything about her birthday party. What I found changed everything. Emma's birthday was not the same day as my wedding. Her birthday was 3 weeks after my wedding, and according to her Instagram posts, she was planning a small dinner with close friends, not a country club party. I spent hours going through her posts, looking for any mention of a 21st birthday party on my wedding day. There was nothing. In fact, her posts from around that time were about being excited for summer break and planning to visit her grandmother. I screenshot everything and went to my parents' house the next morning. I walked into their kitchen and placed my phone on the counter with the evidence displayed. I asked them to explain to me why they had lied about Emma's birthday party. The silence that followed was the longest 60 seconds of my life. Finally, my father said that they had gotten the dates mixed up, that Emma's party was actually the weekend after my wedding, and that they could attend both events. But I had already thought of that. I showed them Emma's posts from the previous month, where she specifically mentioned that her birthday was 3 weeks after my wedding date. I showed them posts where she talked about planning a small celebration, not a country club party. I asked them again why they had lied to me about missing my wedding. That's when my mother broke down and told me the truth. Jake had asked them not to come to my wedding. Emma had never invited them to any party. There was no scheduling conflict. Jake had told them that he thought my wedding was going to be small and boring, and that he and Emma had plans to go away that weekend. He said that if our parents came to my wedding, it would look weird that he and Emma weren't there, and he didn't want to have to explain their absence to Emma's parents. Jake had convinced our parents that my wedding wasn't important enough to prioritize, and that maintaining their relationship with Emma's family was more important than being at their own daughter's wedding. But even this wasn't the whole truth. As my mother continued talking, more details came out. Jake had been telling our parents for months that I was selfish and demanding, that I expected too much from them, and that I had always been jealous of his relationship with Emma. He had convinced them that I was trying to compete with Emma, and that my wedding was just an attention-seeking event. Jake had systematically poisoned my parents against me, using my own independence and strength as evidence that I didn't need their support. But the worst part was yet to come. My mother, through tears, admitted that Jake had threatened to cut them off from his life if they prioritized me over Emma in any way. He had told them that Emma's family was wealthy and well-connected, and that maintaining a relationship with them was important for his future. He had also told them that I would always forgive them no matter what they did, so they didn't need to worry about losing me. Jake had calculated that he could manipulate our parents into choosing him over me because he knew I was the forgiving one, the understanding one, the one who would always be there. He had weaponized my love and loyalty against me. Sitting in that kitchen, looking at my parents' faces as they admitted to being manipulated by their own son into abandoning their daughter, I felt something break inside me that I knew would never fully heal. But I also felt something else. I felt a clarity that I had never experienced before. I realized that this wasn't just about my wedding. This was about years of systematic favoritism, manipulation, and emotional abuse that I had normalized and excused. I told my parents that I needed time to process what they had told me, and I left their house not knowing if I would ever be able to forgive them. My wedding day came, and it was beautiful despite everything. David's family surrounded us with love and support. My college friends who had traveled from across the country to be there filled the space where my parents should have been. But the absence of my parents was felt by everyone. During the father-daughter dance, David's father stepped in to dance with me, and I cried tears that were equal parts gratitude and grief. After the wedding, I went on my honeymoon determined to focus on my new marriage and put the family drama behind me. But when I returned, I found that the situation had gotten even worse. Jake had been telling extended family members that I was being dramatic about the wedding situation, that our parents had a legitimate scheduling conflict, and that I was holding a grudge over something minor. He had convinced several family members that I was the problem, that I was jealous of his relationship with Emma, and that I was trying to turn people against him. When I tried to explain what had really happened, some family members said that Jake had already told them I would probably make up stories to get attention. Jake had preemptively discredited me with our extended family, ensuring that if I ever tried to tell the truth, it would look like I was lying. This was when I realized that Jake wasn't just manipulative, he was calculating and strategic in his manipulation. I decided that I needed to protect myself and my marriage from this toxicity. I started setting boundaries with my parents and limiting contact with Jake. But Jake wasn't finished with his manipulation. 6 months after my wedding, my parents called me to tell me that Jake and Emma were engaged. They were planning to get married the following year, and Jake had asked them to contribute the $30,000 they had been saving for his wedding. But now, Jake was also asking them to take out a loan for an additional $20,000 because Emma's parents were contributing $50,000, and Jake wanted to match their contribution. My parents were stressed about the debt they would be taking on, but they felt obligated to help Jake because they had promised him a beautiful wedding. When I pointed out that they had never offered to help me with my wedding, they said that Jake's situation was different because Emma's family was contributing so much, and they didn't want to look inferior. They were willing to go into debt to keep up appearances for Jake's wedding, but they had let me plan my entire wedding alone. I told them that I couldn't listen to them complain about Jake's wedding expenses when they had made it clear that my wedding wasn't worth their financial support or even their presence. That's when my mother said something that revealed the true depth of the dysfunction. She said that Jake had told them that if they didn't support his wedding the way he wanted, he would make sure they never had a relationship with his future children. Jake was holding grandchildren hostage to ensure his parents' compliance with his demands. But my mother also said something else that shattered the last of my illusions about my family. She said that Jake had told them that I was never going to have children, so they didn't need to worry about maintaining a relationship with me for the sake of grandchildren. Jake had somehow convinced our parents that I was less valuable as a daughter because I wasn't going to provide them with grandchildren, while he was more valuable because he would. I was stunned by the calculated cruelty of this manipulation. Jake had found a way to convince our parents that investing in his future was more important than maintaining a relationship with me. The truth was, David and I had been trying to have children for over a year, but we were dealing with fertility issues. This was something private and painful that we had only shared with my parents in confidence. Jake had taken this private struggle and used it as a weapon against me. I realized that I was dealing with someone who had no limits to his manipulation and no concern for the pain he caused. That's when I made the decision to completely cut contact with Jake and to severely limit contact with my parents. I told my parents that I would not be attending Jake's wedding, that I would not be contributing to it financially or emotionally, and that I needed a break from the family dynamic that had become toxic. My parents were shocked by my decision. They said they couldn't understand why I was being so dramatic and that Jake was just looking out for his future. They asked me to consider how my absence would look to Emma's family and whether I really wanted to embarrass them in front of people who were important to Jake's career. Even in that moment, they were more concerned about how my boundaries would affect Jake than about how Jake's behavior had affected me. I maintained my boundaries, and Jake's wedding happened without me. I heard from mutual friends that it was an elaborate affair with over 300 guests and that our parents looked uncomfortable the entire time, probably because they were thinking about the debt they had taken on to pay for it. After the wedding, I expected things to calm down. I thought maybe Jake would be satisfied with having gotten everything he wanted and would leave me alone. But Jake had one more manipulation to execute. 3 months after his wedding, Jake called me directly for the first time in over a year. He said that he wanted to repair our relationship and that he realized he had made mistakes. He invited me to dinner to talk things through, just the two of us. I was hesitant, but I also missed having a brother. Despite everything he had done, I still had love for him and hoped that we could find a way forward. We met at a restaurant halfway between our homes, and Jake started the conversation by apologizing for how things had gone with my wedding. He said that he realized he had been selfish and that he wanted to make things right. I was cautiously optimistic, thinking that maybe marriage had matured him and that he was ready to be a better brother. But as the conversation continued, I realized that this was just another manipulation. Jake told me that he and Emma were planning to buy a house and that our parents had already committed to helping with the down payment. He said that he was worried about our parents' financial situation because they had taken on so much debt for his wedding. Then he asked me if I would be willing to contribute to our parents' expenses to help them recover from the financial strain of his wedding. Jake was asking me to help pay for the debt that our parents had taken on to fund his wedding, the wedding that I hadn't been invited to contribute to and that they had prioritized over my wedding. When I pointed out the absurdity of this request, Jake said that he thought I would want to help our parents because I was financially stable and didn't have the expenses that he and Emma had as newlyweds. He was trying to manipulate me into paying for the consequences of his own manipulation. I told Jake that I would not be contributing to our parents' financial recovery, and that I was disappointed that he had orchestrated this dinner under false pretenses. Jake's demeanor immediately changed. He dropped the apologetic act and became aggressive and accusatory. He told me that I had always been selfish and jealous, that I had never been happy for his success, and that I was holding grudges over minor misunderstandings. He said that Emma's family had noticed my absence from the wedding and had commented on how unsupportive I was as a sister. Jake was trying to make me feel guilty for maintaining the boundaries I had set to protect myself from his manipulation. But then he said something that revealed the true scope of his manipulation and gave me the ammunition I needed to protect myself. Jake told me that he had been planning for years to make sure that our parents would prioritize his needs over mine. He said that he had recognized early on that I was the favorite child academically and professionally, and that he needed to work harder to secure our parents' financial and emotional support. He admitted that he had been systematically undermining me with our parents for years, making sure they saw me as independent and capable while positioning himself as needy and requiring support. Jake confessed that he had deliberately sabotaged my relationship with our parents to ensure that they would always choose him when forced to make a choice. He said all of this as if it were a reasonable strategy, as if it were something I should understand and even admire. Jake had planned and executed a years-long campaign to turn our parents against me, and he was proud of it. I recorded this entire conversation on my phone. After dinner, I went home and made copies of the recording. I also gathered all the text messages, emails, and social media evidence I had collected over the years. I had documentation of Jake's lies about Emma's birthday party, evidence of our parents' financial favoritism, and now a recorded confession of Jake's systematic manipulation. I was finally ready to confront the situation with the truth. I invited my parents to my house for what I told them was an important family discussion. When they arrived, I presented them with all the evidence I had gathered. I played Jake's confession in its entirety, letting them hear their son admit to years of manipulation and lies. I showed them the evidence of Jake's lies about Emma's birthday party and the timeline of his deception. I documented every instance of financial favoritism, every time they had prioritized Jake's wants over my needs, every time they had made excuses for treating me differently. My parents sat in stunned silence as I laid out the systematic nature of Jake's manipulation and their complicity in it. When I finished, my father was the first to speak. He said that they had never realized how much Jake had been manipulating them and that they were horrified to learn the truth. My mother was crying and saying that she couldn't believe Jake had been so calculating and cruel. But then something happened that showed me how deep the dysfunction ran. After the initial shock wore off, my parents started making excuses for Jake. They said that he was young and insecure, that he probably felt threatened by my achievements, and that his manipulation came from a place of fear rather than malice. They said that they understood why he had felt the need to secure their support, and that they were partially to blame for creating a competitive environment. My parents were making excuses for their son's systematic emotional abuse of their daughter. I realized that even when confronted with undeniable evidence of Jake's manipulation, they were more interested in protecting him than in acknowledging the harm that had been done to me. This was the moment I understood that the problem wasn't just Jake's manipulation. It was also my parents' willingness to be manipulated when it came to their son. I told my parents that I needed them to acknowledge the harm that had been done, to take responsibility for their role in enabling Jake's behavior, and to commit to changing the family dynamic. I said that I needed them to stop making excuses for Jake and to start holding him accountable for his actions. My parents said they would talk to Jake about his behavior, but they also asked me to consider forgiving him because he was family and because they believed he could change. They were asking me to forgive someone who had never asked for forgiveness and who had shown no remorse for his actions. I realized that my parents were never going to prioritize my well-being over Jake's comfort, and that any relationship with them would always be conditional on my willingness to accept Jake's behavior. I made the decision to maintain very limited contact with my parents and no contact with Jake. I sent them a letter explaining my boundaries. I would see them occasionally for holidays and special occasions, but I would not attend events where Jake was present. I would not discuss Jake with them, and I would not be contributing to any family financial decisions that involved Jake. I also told them that if they wanted to have a relationship with me, they needed to stop sharing information about my life with Jake and stop trying to facilitate reconciliation between us. My parents were upset by these boundaries, but they agreed to respect them. For the next year, I had minimal contact with my family. I focused on my marriage, my career, and building relationships with people who valued and respected me. David and I also started seeing a therapist together to work through the family trauma and its impact on our relationship. The therapy helped me understand that I had been conditioned to accept mistreatment from my family because I had been taught that my value came from being understanding and forgiving. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't cruel or selfish. It was necessary for my mental health and well-being. I also learned that I couldn't control my family's behavior, but I could control my response to it. About 18 months after I had set these boundaries, I received a call from my mother that changed everything again. She was calling to tell me that Jake and Emma were getting divorced. Emma had discovered that Jake had been hiding debt from her, including the money he owed our parents for the wedding. She had also found evidence that Jake had been lying to her about his job situation and his financial prospects. Emma's parents had hired a lawyer to help her navigate the divorce, and in the process, they had discovered that Jake had been lying about his relationship with our family as well. Jake had told Emma's parents that he came from a wealthy family and that our parents were planning to help him start a business. He had used our parents' wedding contribution as evidence of their financial capacity to support him. Emma's parents had been impressed by Jake's family's apparent wealth and had seen him as a good investment for their daughter's future. When the truth came out during the divorce proceedings, Emma's parents were furious at being deceived. They had hired a private investigator to look into Jake's background, and the investigator had discovered the truth about Jake's manipulation of our family, including his lies about my wedding and his systematic undermining of my relationship with our parents. Emma's parents had presented this information to their daughter as evidence of Jake's character and his capacity for deception. Emma was horrified to learn that Jake had manipulated his own family and had deliberately sabotaged his sister's wedding. She had reached out to me through social media to apologize for her unwitting role in the situation and to let me know that she had never asked Jake's parents to miss my wedding for her birthday party. Emma told me that she had never even met our parents at the time of my wedding and that she had only learned about my wedding through social media posts after the fact. She said that when she had asked Jake why his parents weren't in any of the wedding photos, he had told her that they were camera shy and preferred to stay in the background. Emma had no idea that our parents had missed my wedding entirely. When she learned the truth, Emma had confronted Jake, and he had admitted to lying about the birthday party. He had also admitted to manipulating our parents and to systematically undermining me. Emma said that this revelation had been the final straw in a marriage that had already been struggling due to Jake's lies and manipulation. She was divorcing him and had given our parents' contact information to her parents' lawyer in case they needed to recover any money that had been obtained through deception. My mother was calling me because she was afraid that Emma's parents were going to sue Jake for fraud, and she wanted to know if I would be willing to testify on Jake's behalf. She said that Jake was desperate and that he had finally realized the consequences of his actions. She said that he was ready to apologize and make amends, and that he needed his family's support during this difficult time. My mother was asking me to help protect the brother who had spent years systematically destroying my relationship with my family. I told my mother that I would not be testifying on Jake's behalf, and that I would not be providing him with any support during his divorce. I said that Jake's consequences were the result of his own choices, and that I had no obligation to protect him from them. My mother was upset by my refusal, but she didn't try to argue with me. I think she finally understood that I was serious about my boundaries. A few weeks later, I received a call from Jake himself. He was crying and apologetic, saying that he had ruined his life and that he needed his family's help to rebuild. He said that he finally understood how much he had hurt me and that he was ready to make things right. But as the conversation continued, I realized that Jake was still trying to manipulate me. He said that he had learned his lesson and that he would never lie or manipulate anyone again, but then he asked me to talk to Emma and convince her to give him another chance. He said that if I could just explain to Emma that he was changing and that he came from a good family, maybe she would reconsider the divorce. Jake was asking me to help him manipulate his wife into staying with him. Even in his moment of apparent remorse, Jake was still trying to use me as a tool for his manipulation. I told Jake that I would not be helping him with his marriage and that I would not be providing him with any support unless he demonstrated genuine change over a sustained period of time. I said that his apologies were meaningless without behavioral change and that I was not interested in being part of his life until he could prove that he had truly changed. Jake became angry and accused me of being vindictive and holding grudges. He said that I was enjoying watching him suffer and that I was being cruel to someone who was trying to change. He was trying to make me feel guilty for maintaining boundaries that protected me from his manipulation. I ended the call and blocked his number. The divorce was finalized 6 months later, and Jake moved back in with our parents temporarily. I heard through mutual friends that he was struggling financially and emotionally, and that he was seeing a therapist. Part of me felt sorry for him, but I also recognized that this was the first time in his life that Jake was experiencing real consequences for his actions. I hoped that this crisis might finally force him to confront his behavior and develop empathy for the people he had hurt. But I also knew that it wasn't my responsibility to help him through this process or to make it easier for him. My parents called me occasionally to update me on Jake's situation and to ask if I was ready to reconcile with him. I told them that I was open to reconciliation if Jake demonstrated genuine change, but that I would not be making any effort to repair the relationship myself. I said that Jake needed to take responsibility for the harm he had caused and to prove that he had changed before I would consider rebuilding trust with him. 2 years passed with minimal contact between me and Jake. During this time, David and I started a family through adoption, bringing home our daughter when she was 6 months old. When I told my parents about the adoption, they were thrilled and asked to meet their granddaughter. I agreed to let them visit, but I made it clear that I would not be bringing our daughter to family events where Jake was present until I was confident that the toxic family dynamic had been addressed. My parents accepted this boundary without argument, which showed me that they were finally taking my limits seriously. During their visit, my parents spent time with their granddaughter and seemed genuinely happy to be grandparents. But they also used the opportunity to update me on Jake's progress. They said that Jake had been in therapy for over a year and that he was working on understanding his behavior patterns and developing healthier coping mechanisms. They said that he had gotten a stable job and was living independently again, and that he seemed to be genuinely committed to changing. My parents asked if I would be willing to consider a mediated conversation with Jake, facilitated by a family therapist. I told them that I would think about it, but that I wasn't ready to commit to anything yet. 3 months later, I received a letter from Jake. It was 8 pages long and contained a detailed apology for his behavior over the years. Jake acknowledged that he had systematically manipulated our parents, that he had deliberately sabotaged my relationship with them, and that he had caused me significant emotional harm. He took responsibility for his lies about Emma's birthday party, for turning our parents against me, and for trying to manipulate me even during his divorce. Jake said that he had been in therapy for over a year and that he was working on understanding the root causes of his manipulative behavior. He said that he had developed narcissistic traits as a way of coping with insecurity and fear, and that he had learned to use manipulation as a tool for getting his needs met. Jake acknowledged that this behavior was abusive and that it had caused harm to everyone in our family. He said that he understood if I never wanted to have a relationship with him again, but that he wanted me to know that he was committed to changing and that he would respect whatever boundaries I set. The letter felt different from his previous apologies. It was specific, it took full responsibility, and it didn't ask for anything from me in return. I showed the letter to my therapist, who helped me process my feelings about it. She said that the letter showed signs of genuine insight and accountability, but that real change would need to be demonstrated through consistent behavior over time. She also said that I had no obligation to give Jake another chance, even if he had genuinely changed. I decided to respond to Jake's letter with a short note acknowledging that I had received it and that I appreciated his taking responsibility for his actions. I said that I was glad he was working on himself, but that I wasn't ready to have a relationship with him yet. I told him that if he was truly committed to change, he would need to demonstrate it consistently over time, and that I would reassess the possibility of reconciliation in the future. Jake responded with a brief note thanking me for my response and saying that he understood my position. He said that he would continue working on himself and that he would respect my boundaries. Over the next year, Jake demonstrated consistent change. He maintained stable employment, continued with therapy, and showed respect for my boundaries. He sent me a card on my birthday with a simple message wishing me well, but he didn't ask for anything in return. When our daughter had her first birthday, Jake sent a gift through our parents with a note saying that he was happy for our family and that he hoped our daughter would grow up surrounded by love and support. These gestures felt different from his previous attempts at reconciliation. They were respectful, they didn't demand anything from me, and they showed consideration for my feelings. After a year of consistent, respectful behavior, I agreed to meet with Jake for a supervised conversation with a family therapist. The meeting was emotional but productive. Jake continued to take responsibility for his actions and showed genuine understanding of the harm he had caused. He didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation, but he expressed hope that we might someday be able to have a relationship again. I told Jake that I was willing to consider rebuilding our relationship gradually, but that it would require continued demonstration of change and respect for my boundaries. We agreed to meet occasionally with the therapist present and to see how things progressed. Over the following year, Jake and I slowly rebuilt a limited relationship. We met every few months with the therapist, and eventually we were able to have supervised visits that included our daughter. Jake was respectful and appropriate during these visits, and he showed genuine interest in being a positive presence in our daughter's life. Our relationship will never be what it was before, and I will never trust Jake completely. But I have been able to forgive him and to allow him to be part of our family in a limited way. The key was that Jake demonstrated genuine change over a sustained period of time, and he proved that he could respect my boundaries and prioritize my well-being. My relationship with my parents has also evolved. They have acknowledged their role in enabling Jake's behavior, and they have committed to treating both of their children fairly going forward. They have also shown respect for my boundaries and have not pressured me to reconcile with Jake on any timeline other than my own. Most importantly, they have shown that they value their relationship with me and that they are willing to work to maintain it. The process of healing from this family trauma has taken years, and it has required consistent therapeutic work and boundary setting. But I have learned that it is possible to heal from family dysfunction and to build healthy relationships even after significant betrayal. I've also learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or returning to old patterns. It means choosing to release resentment while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. My family will never be perfect, but it is now functional and respectful. We have learned to communicate honestly, to respect each other's boundaries, and to prioritize the well-being of all family members. If you're dealing with family dysfunction or manipulation, I want you to know that you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve to have your feelings validated and your boundaries respected. It's okay to set limits with family members who are harmful to your well-being, and it's okay to require genuine change before you consider reconciliation. You are not responsible for fixing other people's behavior, and you are not obligated to maintain relationships that are harmful to you. Healing is possible, but it requires commitment to your own well-being and the courage to set boundaries even when it's difficult. You are worthy of love and respect, and you deserve to be surrounded by people who value and support you. Have you experienced family favoritism or manipulation? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, and I hope that sharing my experience can help you feel less alone in your journey. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content about family relationships, setting boundaries, and healing from trauma. Your support means everything to me, and I'm grateful to be part of this community of people who are committed to building healthier relationships and supporting each other through difficult times.